Hello, Solo Board Game Guide here, and another update on the declined Solitaire RPG game that's in progress at the moment. Thanks to everyone who has signed up in the comments. It's much appreciated, and I really love the feedback you're giving me and the suggestions you're giving me for the game. Really helpful. What I want to do today is take a bit of a step away from the gameplay and actually look at creating some of the art assets. What I want to do on this channel is show the whole process, and I'm going to show you how I made one of these first card terrain pieces from the opening quest. Now it's not quite finished, it will look better than this, but it's 90% of the way there. So what you're seeing here is basically I've started off from a template which is supplied from my printer of choice, and I'm working in Adobe Photoshop. If you're interested in that kind of thing, then I'll be doing a few tutorials on the techniques I'm doing on this channel. So this pink line here is like the safe area, as they call it in printing. So basically I'm guaranteed to get everything in that area on the final card. And this slightly white overlay is going to be about the size of the card. Now I intend to have it printed right to the edge, so the actual grid spaces themselves, the movement spaces, they're going to be 10mm in size, just a touch bigger than a 10mm miniature, so they can move around this grid, seek cover, and have lots of interesting interactions with terrain. So yeah, I'll show you how I've created this. So again, if you're not a Photoshop user, then basically you have all these different layers which you can turn on and off. You can hide different things, and it leaves lots of interesting possibilities for arranging terrain. So once you've got some basic elements, you can actually fairly quickly create terrain pieces. So which is why one of the reasons why I've got a lot of confidence that I'll be able to pull this off despite not being a graphic designer. So I started off from this thing, and I'm working at what they call 300 dpi dots per inch, which is a professional printing grade standard of resolution. So it looks great. If you ever printed a photograph when from a printer it looks grainy, that's because it's not been the right resolution. So from there I've created a seamless background texture of some grass. It's a patchy sort of grassland wilderness scene. It still needs some shading on there yet, but I went out walking in the Lake District the other week and took some highly interesting, well, there's some actual photos as well, there's me, some beautiful photographs, but I also took lots of terrain photos of things like rocks on the floor and some grass textures, and I'll do a video on how you can actually create a texture from scratch using this amazing website, imgonline.com.ua. But there's also textures.com, which is a massive repository of free to use textures, and I've downloaded this particular texture here for the purposes of this first map tile. I've created it as I've defined it as a pattern, and basically what you can do is you can select what pattern you're going to use and you can scale it up. You know, I could have entirely a field of daffodils, which looks terrible of course, but with a bit of clever use of scaling and shading, you can make something that looks pretty realistic. And that's a lot of how these battle maps are done, both on the neoprene kind that you can buy and also on you know, a lot of the RPG maps. So this is a blank, I'll hide some of these elements here. That's what it looks like with just the repeated pattern. You can actually see a few of the repeats subtly enough. There's like a patch there which repeats here and here, but it is quite subtle, especially if you start hiding some of these more recognizable elements with a few different features. So this is all very well and good. This little thing here I'm calling a decal, and that is actually from where are we? This is actually this section here. So I'm slightly terrified that I'm going to be the kind of person who's going to be walking around taking photos of the ground now, trying to find interesting bits of rocks for a board game that I'm making up in my head. But I guess that's the kind of person I am. So this section here, I've ended up editing in something that I've called Decals. I've just got one for now. And it looks like that. So this checkered pattern you see in the background is a transparency layer. So I've edited out a lot of that tufty grass. And then I've thrown that onto here and adjusted the transparency down. So it sort of looks like a pathway into this dwelling, which is going to be the feature of one of the very first quests in here. I've got a tree on there. It needs scattered rocks and branches and things of that nature. And the website that I was making reference to before actually has a lot of these textures that you can use. Branches, for example, here. I'm not sure how quick my internet's going to be, but you can download lots of items which will, litter the floor and make it look a lot more realistic. And by building up these elements, it looks a lot more realistic. So, going back to my my map tile, the obvious extra features are these beautiful art assets of the building and the trees and there's various other things. Now, by day, I'm actually an engineering designer. I use computer design software all the time, but I'm a complete amateur when it comes to Photoshop, and I'm certainly no artist. So, yeah, I couldn't possibly create this kind of stuff. So I've gone to some lengths to find commercially usable assets. And there's a guy called Steve Gaudreau who does lots of Kickstarters all the time, who's licensed some of his work to be used to his software called MapForge. Now, MapForge is going to be amazing. And I say it's going to be because it's not quite there yet, at least not on my machine. It's not beta, but it's very early days for this software, and it's quite buggy, at least on my build of machine. So when I drag things in, it tends to crash, hang, give weird graphics, glitches and render problems. I'm sure that'll all go away in good time. Complete faith in the guy. I've actually emailed a guy called Hernandez, and he's extremely responsive, and he's working really hard on the software, and it's brilliant. But I'll just show you the kind of assets that are in here. If I choose this stamp tool, so this is pretty typical of it. If you're working in it, or when I'm working in it, it's quite slow. I can place trees. I can choose different items. And to give you an idea, this usually appears down here. It's all acting a bit weird. And I built some sort of quite, well, maps that I'm very happy with. But I've lost them, after a few hours of work. Even though I'm saving, things don't quite work as I expected. But all these... yeah, this is what I'm finding. Lots and lots of sort of failures and errors. So what I'm doing basically, there you go. Look, you see bones and altars and shrines, and it's from these incredibly talented artists who have chosen to license. Right, I have paid for it, of course. I bought commercially licensed art to use in the game. I'm not so naive to try and make a game that I'll end up getting sued for making. But at the moment, the software isn't quite there. In time, it will be enough to create it, create maps on their own. So what I've been doing is putting this crazy red background on, and then I throw it into Photoshop, and I get this kind of thing. So I need to take the background out. So they've got a couple of tools in there. I have the background eraser tool here. If it's not set up right, then what happens is you start deleting the actual assets themselves. So there's a setting which is hidden away, which is this, which it samples the background swatch. So what you have to do, use an eyedropper tool, select the background, make sure it's set to the background instead of foreground. Go into the magic eraser tool or the background eraser tool, and then go in, delete all around the edge. Photoshop's amazing. Like I said, I use CAD every day. I use SolidWorks actually at work to create 3D models of things for engineering purposes, but this is it's quite magical. Now I'm sure some professional graphic designers looking at me and thinking, what on earth are you doing? But here we are. There we go. So go around that. I'll go around this tree. go around this. And there's so many parameters you can adjust. You can adjust the flow and the tolerance and all the rest of it. And then I can just go into a standard magic eraser, kill that background. So now I've got some transparent assets which I can copy, make sure they're at the correct resolution for my file. I can paste them on, start translating them, spinning them around, moving them about, and I get this kind of effect. So that's basically the overview of the process. If for those who are interested, I will be doing some full tutorials on how to create seamless backgrounds and so on, and I'll actually probably do a build-up of a map tile from scratch. But that's the process. And again, if you've got any suggestions, ideas for quests or cool terrain pieces, game mechanics, I would love to hear it. And if you haven't already, do sign up to the newsletter, which is in the description, because I'm going to be giving you first access to all the gameplay and play testing. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.